Welcome to Tech Smarter. My name is Abby Ritchie. I'm the tech guru at the Smarter Service, and you can find me right here every Wednesday talking with people who are engaged in aging services. And it is a marvelous place to be, having had these conversations with people for the past 7 or 8 years, and things just keep evolving and innovating, and it is so exciting. Before I bring on my guest today, I want to thank our sponsors at Leading Age Arizona for sponsoring this episode and for the Smarter Service for producing it. And if you're a senior living operator and you are struggling with your residents' tech questions, and we know their questions have questions, and if that's something that your community needs more support with, go ahead and reach out to me on LinkedIn. We have professionalized this service, and we would love to speak with you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to bring my guest on today. Welcome to Tech Smarter, Therese.
Thank you so much, Abby, and thank you so much for having me here today.
You are welcome. It's an honor to have you here. We have interacted many times at conferences and maybe even been speaking at the same conference. And, for anyone who's not familiar with what you do, could you please explain your origin story and how you landed in senior living?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. So I have been in senior living for over 15 years now. My master's and background is in gerontology. And so I am perhaps like so many people who work in senior living that were just born to do this work. I was really involved working with and volunteering with older adults when I was a younger child and just really loved my experiences. And I grew up just thinking about older adults in such a beautiful way. I saw older adults across the age continuum being incredibly engaged, volunteering well into their hundreds. And I just assumed everyone had this really age positive mindset. And I even moved to Costa Rica after completing my degree, and I wasn't really totally sure what I wanted to do, but I thought I wanted to work with older adults. So I took a volunteer job at a hogar, which supported older adults in a beautiful community in Costa Rica. And I figured if I can work with older adults in another country in a different language, then that is something that I can pursue long term. And I came back to the States, and my first job was in skilled nursing. And I was just a little surprised by the culture, by the standard of care. And it just became my life mission that we needed to talk differently about aging. We needed a new narrative. And I was lucky enough to just stumble upon some amazing mentors who really showed a different narrative around aging and what it meant to grow older. And I just became inspired. And I was really fortunate to get a job with Eskaton, working in life enrichment 14 years ago. And they were open enough to listening some of my wild ideas around language. And I have been on a journey with them for the last 14 years, really thinking differently about the experience of aging and how do we transform and reimagine what getting older looks like, because we're all aging.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to happen to all of us. So, I love your origin story, and one of my biggest joys in doing this is that I'm able to interview people who also have just fallen in love with the older adult. For me, I grew up with my Nana and Papa, and I just have a deep love and admiration for older adults. It's why I do what I do. And when you have that love and that admiration, it's like you just want to extend that out as far as possible and continue to allow an older adult to connect and to thrive and just like continue living their purpose-filled lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about your recent conference when you were at Bold, and you were talking about changing the narrative on the language.
Yeah, language is so important. I think it's so underestimated how powerful language is. And every day we're telling a story, and we're telling older adults a story about who they are with the language that we use as a senior living provider. And we're telling that same story to our team members. And so if team members are constantly using language that focuses on decline, limitations, or what someone can no longer do, residents start to internalize the story. And if we think even beyond just residents, older adults in general start internalizing the story that we're creating, that our media is creating, that our marketing campaigns are telling. And so really, I think, the opposite is also true. When we talk about strengths and abilities and growth and possibility, we can create a culture where people are more willing to try something new. And the conversation with at Leading Age California, with Anna Hall and with Lola Rain was all about that. How do we tell a new story? And not even a new story. How do we tell the authentic story of aging? And so it was a really awesome conversation.
That, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And, I've been in that same realm too, when I'm talking to people, whether it's in the media or I'm just, sharing what our mission is with the Smarter service. And it's really to change the narrative around older adults using technology, because the prevailing myth for so long was that they weren't interested. And that's 100% not true. But I would find, just from working with people, that they would begin to absorb that idea that they're not smart, they can't do it, and that they're not qualified, for instance. And so just really changing that narrative when I'm working with people, and just letting them know, like, you bring so much wisdom and life experience to this. And so no, there's no way I'm going to let you tell me that, you're stupid or you're going to break it or something like that. So, I loved in your session, you advocate for no F-bombs. And, I interviewed Lola that same day too, and we did it live from the conference, and it was fabulous. So, and how does intentionally choosing uplifting communication build the baseline trust for older adults to confidently adapt?
So, my favorite F-bomb, and Lola would hang me out to dry if I don't say that, is the word facility.
Yeah.
And, that Lola and I have been saying that for a decade. Like, can we get rid of this word facility?
Yeah.
Older adults don't want to live in facilities. They want to live in communities. They want to live in homes where we all want to live. We all want to age in a home. And, when we use words like facility and placement and beds and asset, it may seem really harmless, but it creates this distance between us and older adults, and it creates this dichotomy of us versus them. And especially when we use more human-centered language that really communicates respect, that helps enable trust and respect. And to your point, Abby, when you were talking about the adoption of technology, that couldn't be more true, because oftentimes that's where you start when it comes to technology adoption. It starts with trust and having that relationship with that person. And trust is the foundation of technology adoption. People aren't adopting technology because the features are impressive. They're adopting it because they trust the people introducing it. And so if we don't, as team members, if we haven't done our due diligence, if we haven't explored that technology, and if we don't trust it, then it's going to be really hard to gain the trust of the residents that this could potentially be a really amazing solution. But if we get that relationship right, the technology becomes so much easier. And if we frame everything from our relationship with the person, it all becomes so much easier.
It really does. And I just want to backtrack just a little bit to the F-bomb again, because in my experience, when I'm talking to people who really don't get senior living, they use some of those other words to describe it. And I have seen firsthand how some of these communities, they are luxury resort retirement communities that the resident planned for 20, 30 years ago to be there in some of these communities. And it's just like, hey, you know what? You're framing this in a way that just is no longer part of what residents are actually experiencing these days.
Absolutely. I think it goes away from this narrative of lifelong learning and growth. The residents who are living with us, their needs have changed.
Yeah.
What they expect, their expectations have also changed. And sure, we're not seeing, all residents moving in with incredibly high technology adoption, but there is this digital literacy emerging that we've never seen before, where even if perhaps they don't feel confident with digital tools, they're very tech curious and they see the possibilities. I host a longevity circle at one of our larger life plan communities, and some of the conversations with this amazing group of 25 residents is around how are they leveraging, artificial intelligence and ChatGPT on reviewing their medication lists. And when one resident shares that, their peers are like, what? Tell me about that. How are you doing that? And so it opens up this world of possibility. And I think it always goes back to what I always think it goes back to is empowerment. How can technology be a tool of empowerment? Yeah. So often, to your point, Abby, people come into the space thinking about how can technology help us manage decline, when the question should be, how are we creating tools of empowerment? And I think when we flip the lens, it helps with the creation of a product that resonates so much more with the end user than a product that is really just there to help manage their decline process. Like, that does not sound appealing to me. And I don't think it would be appealing to anyone, regardless of our age. I don't want someone managing me. I want tools that help me live better. And we've done so many interesting, successful pilots, from smart toilets to hip airbags, and the really successful ones where residents got really excited. They are always tools that empower them to have the data for them to act upon quicker. It's those tools that help them live their lives better and fuller, which is spectacular and such huge opportunity for our technology partners, especially if they adopted that lens that you were referencing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that from what I found, it's not just about doing a tech rollout; it's about doing tech education.
Yes.
Because the older adult is a scholar. Like, they're scholars at their core, and they, took notes, read textbooks front to back, studied everything. Like, they want to know the inner workings of something so that they can build upon their foundation. And once that's in place, like, then they have that sense of empowerment that you were talking about. And like, I'm just curious, in a multi-site organization, how do you do a rollout that's going to ensure that it's going to fit your residents' needs?
Whew, a deep discovery process. That's such a good question, because, discovery, at least for us, is probably the least glamorous part of innovation. I do think it's sometimes the most fun. I love pausing and talking with team members, or I love discovering a new need from residents that I would have never even imagined was a problem we needed to solve for. So we just spend a tremendous amount of time listening before doing anything, you can stumble upon all sorts of opportunities for, process improvement or workflow efficiency. But we also spend a lot of time talking to residents. And one of the reasons we have our longevity circle is because that's a really beautiful, regular cadence for a conversation. Just simply talk about, what does longevity mean? And, what does it mean for our residents? And what are their expectations? And how do they see technology being a big part of the solution? And so we spend a considerable amount of time talking to our residents on a regular basis, from families, from team members and department leaders. We have worked really hard at Eskaton to create a culture around innovation. And we tell our team members to never shy away from telling us there is a challenge. We want to know the good, the bad, the ugly. We want to know the limitations. Where are there opportunities for us to make your job easier, to ensure that you have the tools you need to do your job? We want to ensure there's so much that we can be doing to leverage technology to increase the time spent with residents. And that, I think, is one of the things we're getting most excited about, and our team is getting most excited about, because there's so much technology right now that can really be adopted to help streamline more of the administrative, the documentation tasks that are all incredibly important for the clinic, on the clinical side of our house. But the most important, we're a social model. We're people's homes. We're not hospitals. We don't want to be hospitals. We want to focus more on the relationship and how we're spending time with our residents. And so it's a lot of talking.
But it's discovery. That's what it is.
It's discovery. It's a lot of talking and a lot of listening. Actually, not a lot of talking. It's a lot of listening, a lot of discovery.
Yeah, you know what? In my experience, there were so many times where I would start working with someone in a one-on-one session and realize, even though I'm here to help with this and this, they've got a story to tell. And within that story, that's going to help me adjust my ability to serve them based on what their needs are. And there's so many times where I would just say to myself, okay, I got to shelf my agenda here in order to serve this person and listen to what their needs are. Because sometimes with technology, the way an older adult expresses their frustration with the technology, it's not always like there's an app on my phone, but it's not like that. It's like the weather, and then my knees, and then my granddaughter, right? And then eventually they open the door to what's really going on with their frustrations. And so it's really like about listening to what their needs are.
Absolutely. And once you know the need, because that you may have a single technology solution, but each person's need is unique to them. And so identifying the need first, anytime we do a tech rollout, and we're really focused on resident adoption, but we always dig in first. What's the individual need that this particular solution is solving for this person? And we start from there. And it goes back to that relationship. And if there's trust there and they know that they can trust us, then really it opens up that world of possibility of exploring. But you're right. It just starts with, what's the need and how does this make my life better?
Yeah, and we do data tracking with every single person that we work with across all the communities. And we've found over and over again that when we first start working within a community, people just have like this it's broken, please help me fix it mentality. Like that's the base need. But once that is fixed, they start using technology to help further their hobbies, whether it's with family members or it's photography or something like that. Like the whole evolution of their development changes once that one broken thing is fixed, and it's phenomenal. I'm curious because we've worked with a lot of communities who have rolled out things like Alexa and other voice assisted technologies. I'm curious how you were able to do that within your communities.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, Eskaton, we were very fortunate to be the first senior living provider in California to roll out voice technology across multiple communities. And I think, by the end, we had rolled out 1,200 Alexas across all of our communities. And what I love about voice technology is that it just removes barriers. Going back to need, we were originally not looking to roll out voice technology. What was really interesting about our voice story was that we rolled out smart lighting with a remote.
Mm-hmm.
And a resident that I was speaking with, he was living with Parkinson's, and he said, I love that we have smart lighting, and I love that I can control my lights when laying in bed. But on days when my tremor's really bad, I can't use this remote. And he's like, is there any way for me to be able to talk to my lights?
Yeah.
And I said, well, not right now, but we're certainly going to figure out how we can make that happen for you. And I think it took about 18 months, but we came back to him about 12 months later and said, hey, we have a solution that we want you to help us test out. And so, that story is not unique to just that gentleman. Touchscreens can be really challenging because of vision changes, arthritis, tremors, or cognitive change. But voice, it allows people to interact naturally.
Wow.
And we originally thought, this would just be a nice thing to have for people. But it quickly transformed into us recognizing that voice technology is an assisted device, especially for people living with physical and cognitive changes. And that was a huge learning for us. And when we changed the narrative around that technology, the adoption of it skyrocketed because that's how we rolled it out. We met residents, especially those living in assisted living, with that narrative, with those impact stories of how it helped their neighbors. I think of Joyce. She was one of our very early piloting residents of voice technology. And she was living with macular degeneration, and she was about 90% blind.
Mm-hmm.
And she would wake up every morning and she couldn't tell what time it was. And originally she would have to call, she would push her pendant and ask a care partner. And she didn't really like utilizing her pendant for that reason. To her, when she shared that with me, she was like, I really just want to know what time it is. I want to know if it's time for me to wake up. Mm-hmm. And she utilized voice technology to simply ask for the time.
Yeah.
And that was transformative for her. So it's not like people were utilizing the technology for anything wild.
Yeah.
It was just simply again, it was an empowerment tool. It was giving back control. And so we saw, and it was so amazing just to see the adoption. We saw around 80% adoption of of voice technology in assisted living. And we actually saw lower adoption of it in our independent living communities. And we were really curious about it. So we did focus groups with our residents in independent living. And we were like, tell us, we see you're still utilizing it. They were utilizing voice technology to, ask for the menu, ask for the events of the day, but they weren't utilizing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but they weren't using it for the same reasons. They're like, well, that's our exercise, getting up and getting out of my chair to turn on and off the lights. That's my exercise. I don't want to give that up from a voice assistant. When I need it, I want it. And so it reaffirmed this belief of voice technology as an assisted device. Mm. And so it was really special. Doing our voice technology rollout we learned so much just about how people interact with spaces and just it changed our mindset of how one's environment can be so supportive of someone's control and their sense of empowerment. And it's so true. And there's so much exciting developments in this smart home space that we're very closely following.
Nice. Yeah, I love the voice activated assistants, but what I learned, having worked with people who are struggling with Parkinson's, having worked with people with macular degeneration, is like, let's get ahead of that, because we all know, over time our eyesight's going to decrease. We're going to lose dexterity in our fingers, but let's get ahead of that today, because this is going to serve you 10 years from now, right? And it is hard to teach someone with Parkinson's how to activate their voice to get the right type of answer. It's not impossible,
right?
But it's easier before that happens. So I'm a huge proponent of like early education with voice technology, because it is going to serve you for years to come. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the voice world. It seemed like Amazon was originally the Amazon Alexa was one of the very few players, but there seems to be a whole lot of new developments around the voice and just the whole smart home ecosystem that is really exciting, that we're constantly talking with residents about to understand their pulse on it.
Absolutely. Now, I want to ask you, because you probably are able to connect with a lot of innovators in the space who are, pitching you new technologies. What's one thing that you would say to them before they pitch you and before they go to market? What would be your piece of advice to them?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, a lot of times, and I think you've already touched on this, Abby, but a lot of times the technology, it reflects the assumptions of the people who build it. And so, if they're building that piece of technology from a lens of decline, then the technology is often overly protective, overly restrictive, and overly clinical.
Mm-hmm.
And typically for me, I'm constantly vetting solutions from that lens of empowerment. Is this technology designed to manage decline, or has it been thoughtfully designed with older adults through a lens of growth, purpose, and possibility? And so when you design it with older adults, that naturally will happen. That, that iteration typically comes out because it becomes, how does the technology now help someone stay connected? How can it support their independence? How does it strengthen their relationships? And that makes for a much more compelling solution, because it's needs-based, and it's not only going to resonate with the resident, it's going to resonate so much more with the senior living provider as well, because it's going to make adoption so much easier. When communicating and talking with residents about adoption of any new technology, being able to position it from a tool of empowerment is such a better narrative than, hey, we're going to roll out a passive monitoring system that's going to monitor your decline. So it's all about the narrative we tell and the way that we're building the architecture around it. Even the notifications, factors. One of the things that I see a lot is, many of the triggers are really disempowering, and we're really sensitive to, the language that our team members are seeing. If there's not alignment with our approach, with our values at Eskaton, we don't want to perpetuate this narrative of decline, this idea that there's behaviors associated with dementia. No, we really understand at this point that every form of distress is an unmet need, and we want to understand that need. And so if tools are perpetuating, age-old stereotypes or stigmas or utilizing labels, it's not a tool of empowerment. And so a lot of times we're having really candid conversations with technology partners about, is there opportunity to adjust the language? Can we utilize our own training to ensure that your AI is trained and is providing that same level of coaching that a team member, that our trainers would utilize? That's a much more compelling story as well. So I think my first question always is to go back to, what is my core question? I ask them how they designed it. Did you design with, or did you design for?
Yeah.
And I think that typically will share a little bit more about just the way they iterated their product design.
Love that. Love that. It has been so wonderful to have you here today. And for anyone who wants to connect with you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Absolutely. I always love to chat with new people. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also, visit Eskaton's website and stay connected with all of the work that we are doing. Our social media platforms really love to highlight all of the innovative things that we're doing around Eskaton. So I encourage folks to tune in and follow us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank
And
you.
you're welcome. And thank you to Leading Age Arizona for sponsoring this episode. And we will see you all right back here next week.
Bye, Abby. Thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.